much has happened in the past 12, 14 months, and we'd like to discuss what happened in Thailand, in Southeast Asia, and in the world today. For those, many of you, who was here in March last year for his session already? Okay, relatively few people. So it would be worth covering his background from the early beginning. And for those who don't know Pita, he formerly led the Move Forward party in Thailand's May 2023 general election. The party won the election. He was about to be prime minister, and things happened, and he is writing a memoir titled The Almost Prime Minister, or he actually wrote it. And it's about to come out in English from Penguin Random House.
Yes, September.
September, okay, right, September. The English version of the book is coming out, and we got a sneak preview of that, and we'll get some more of that today. So first, please join me in welcoming the Honorable Pita Limjaroenrat. Okay, let's do a bit of a recap of what happened in 2023.
Sure.
And prior to that, your party,
Yes.
under different third name right now, right? From
3.0 now.
Future Forward, Move Forward, and now People's Party. Right?
Exactly.
Future Forward Party, Move Forward Party, and Future People's Party today. And 2023 was a pivotal moment. The movement, really, the party backed by a lot of young generation running on, fair to say, social democratic platform, progressive agenda of democracy, human rights, rule of law, and so on. Again, won the majority, and you were about to become prime minister. What happened?
So what happened in Thailand in year 2023 was pretty much politics of appointed versus elected. Because of the constitution that was written right after the coup before this election, it allows the upper house to be appointed by the military. And then the upper house is elected by the people of Thailand. But to become the prime minister is a joint session majority to select the prime minister. So the lower house has 500. And the upper house appointed by the military junta is 250. So 250 plus 500, it becomes 750 as the entire Congress. So to have that simple majority is 376. So I won the lower house. I managed a coalition of 8 parties, 312 out of 500. That meant that I need about 60 or 70 of appointed senators. But now the politics of appointed, it means you report the people who appointed you. But if you're an elected politician, you respond to the people at the bottom who elected you. So it's a clash that happens during that day that I couldn't become the prime minister the first time because I didn't get enough votes from the appointed senators. I thought I had a couple of times to try it. I remember, citing Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, that before he became the House Speaker, it took him 17 times, right? That's like a lot of frictions, a lot of voting, a lot of negotiations and things like that. But I only got one chance, the second chance when it was to happen. The Constitutional Court unduly suspended me from my member of parliamentship. So that's why I had to walk out of the parliament 1 hour before the prime minister's election. So you could say that it's a constitutional mechanism, the tyranny of the minority, that they found ways to make sure that the election outcome or the people's mandate doesn't have to be the election result or the parliamentary choice. People's choice versus parliamentary chaos. That's me in a nutshell.
It sounds conducive to a lot of disillusionment.
That's why I just, when people ask at Harvard, I said, that almost prime minister guy, and that they understand what happened. But to really unpack, it took me 5 minutes to explain to you what the politics of appointed versus elected and the democratic backsliding that we're talking probably here at FSI and Stanford as well, but they have various ways that the autocrat, the menu of manipulation, how they can always change the election outcome and election result in a non-majoritarian way.
Mm-hmm. And in your case, they came up with this ethics committee kind of decision and morality, right? Bringing up some kind of morality to ban you from politics.
So the professor is talking about the second layer of the onion now. Mm-hmm. What I was telling you was the first onion of how they made sure that people's choice doesn't get to govern. And what I explained to you was the appointed senators, that's one, correct? And the second is the judicial side, which is the constitutional court, correct? And now Professor is introducing the second layer, which they use anti-corruption commission, which is supposed to be an independent organization. And they use morality as an excuse to ban people for life. So you could use political science term if there's any students here, like morality policing or weaponization of morals. I mean, it's good for politicians to always have morale, but my morale and your morale is probably different. And everyone here is also different. As long as politicians have that kind of morale, it's fine. But you should not use it as a punishment or to destroy your political opponents, selectively used and unaccounted for. Like when you say that you are an independent organization as an anti-corruption commission, independent to who? Independent to what? I mean, independent to the people at large, yes, but you have to respond to people who you appointed to. So this kind of thing, there's no proportionality of law in the sense that if you steal, you get punished as, if you steal something. But if you kill someone, then the punishment should be proportionate to your crime. And if I'm found immoral, my punishment is a lifetime ban. You see what I'm trying to say when I say there's no proportionality of law between the infringement and the penalty. So yes, to your question, now that they have also the second onion, the second layer of how you stop reformist, regressive politician, is to ban me for life. So the reason why I'm here is because I'm banned for 10 years. Mm-hmm. That's a result of the first layer. Now with the second layer, they are trying to ban me for life. Yes. So I can never run for public office ever again.
So you're now banned for 10 years, but it could escalate into lifetime ban. Is that what you think they're trying to? Okay.
Yes.
Right.
So they're not done with me yet.
Okay. So we cannot.
But then again, for example, if you just take a macro view of what happened around the world too, I'm going to zoom in and zoom out a little bit. Mm-hmm. Just like what happened in Turkey last week with the opposition leader, for example. They just used a judicial power to ban him from doing his job in opposition. Mm-hmm. If you look back around in this area, you look at Brazil, and whether you like President Lula or not, he also was banned for life from Supreme Court. 7 years later, it got reversed. So I just want to start off, because there's people watching from Thailand probably, that it's not the end of the world, even if it's a lifetime ban. There's pathway back to power. In Bangladesh, he went into exile in England for 17 years. Now he's about to be the prime minister of Bangladesh after a long dictatorship of Sheikh Hasina that flew to India. Mm-hmm. And you see what happened to Lula. You see what happened in Hungary, sort of. You saw the democratic resilience in South Korea. So yes, it's a gloomy picture in Thailand when it comes to competitive autocracies, but it's not the end of the world.
So after that, you went back to Harvard Kennedy School where you got your degree.
Yes.
Jointly with MIT Sloan Business School.
Yes.
MBA. How's life at Harvard Kennedy School?
From campaign to campus?
Yes, campaign to campus. Great chapter title. Yeah.
So I think my calling now is to groom next-gen leaders.
Okay.
So I used to be a player and I did a good job. Mm-hmm. And then they stopped me. They forced me to sit down. So I decided to become a coach instead. So I co-teach a class called How to Run for Public Office in Developing Countries. And I used to take that class with a professor called Steve Jardine. He helped put Clinton in the White House back in the days. So I remember taking textbook and turn it into reality of winning election. And now because my destiny is cut short and I got derailed a little bit, so I used that practical experience. 2023 is not the same as 2011 anymore. And Thailand is not America, developing countries and developed countries arguably are probably not the same. So I turn reality into textbook now. So then I get students from Indonesia, from Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Japan, South Korea, Colombia, Sudan, Guatemala, and all these students who come together and we craft campaigns and articulate why they want to run for public office. I mean, there's a lot of horrible things happening all around the world, but if you keep injecting fresh blood into the system, I mean, sooner or later it will change. So that's how I spend my time there.
That's great. So I left with the impression last year that you were banned from politics for at least 10 years. And then I watched on television that election is coming up in Thailand and you are campaigning there. Can you tell us what you actually banned from and why were you able to campaign? You couldn't run for office, but you were able to campaign for your party. Is that right?
Well, they could take away my title, but they cannot take away my calling. I can still perform as a civic person, civic duty of trying people to get out to vote and trying to tell them why voting turnout matters a lot in democracies and things like that. So I could still register for $15 per day, a little bit above minimum wage, to help any political parties to run. And I can also go on rallies. I can meet with people and try to tell them why they should show up at the voting booth on that day. But he's referring to the general election in February, very recent. We could unpack that if you want. There's another election that is coming up, which is the Bangkok governor and Pattaya mayor. So that's happening in a month or so. So we're talking, I'm here in Stanford in between two important elections, and that's going to test out a lot of things that political scientists back at Harvard, MIT, and probably Stanford would want to use them as a case to really draw out some theories that are happening. And I'm going to start off so that if there's students or professors here that might want to take this line and think and apply it to America or whichever regions you are teaching. Voter fatigue by design. I feel like that would be a label or a sentence that could describe our defeat in February. When it was my time in 2023, my proudest achievement was not that I won, but it was that I made politics sensational and relevant enough that people showed up to vote. 76% of the people showed up to vote. So overseas ties in America, Germany, Japan, South Korea, Israel, all these countries, Berlin, they travel back to Thailand and they vote. And once you have that majority, that comprehensiveness of people coming out, anything is possible. The key success driver in my election campaign is not how strong the candidate is. It's not how weak the competitor is. It's not how young the constituency is. It's not the data back in the 5 election cycles. It's the voting turnout. If the voting turnout is higher than 70%, we win. If the voting turnout is below 70%, we lose, no matter how strong the candidate is. I mean, data don't lie. I mean, you guys are from Stanford. So if you do a regression analysis, it shows me that inclusiveness and participation in democracy in Thailand and many places in the world matters so much. But autocrats know about this as well. So they want to make sure that politics is dramatized, boring, or relevant, and you guys get tired when you talk about politics. And that's what we call voter fatigue by design. And from 76%, it became 65 or something like that. So almost like 10% of people disappeared. 5 million people who used to come out to vote, whether they voted for me or not, it doesn't matter. But they just felt that the cost of going to election exceeds the benefit of going to one. That's the calculus of an autocrat. If they want to manipulate election, they want to make sure that the cost of going to election is higher than the benefit of going to election. They can show you that if you keep going, you're not going to get the candidate that you want. I proved it in 2023. He's in Harvard. He's not in the government house. And if you keep going, nothing's going to change. It's going to be the waste of your time. I know you have a sandwich shop to run. You get a minimum wage. If you go and line up to vote, it's going to take you 4 hours. You can't really get out of the factory to go vote and things like that. So the cost of going is really high. So people just simply don't show up. Whether it's normative way of explaining or actually the cost of going to a voting booth that is so far away, inefficient, it takes a long time for them to vote. They couldn't return to the shift in the factory. So that is something that showed the differences that happened between 2023 and 2026 in Thailand. People were really fed up with politics, and they felt small. They felt impactless, and they felt like their vote didn't matter. And it showed in the numbers that 4 or 5 million people just decided not to show up. And we're talking about 4 or 5 million out of 30 million. So we're talking 20-something, 30-something% of people who decided that it was not worth it for them. But there's many, many more that happened during the time that is different from 2023 and 2026. Conflict is one. So the border conflict between Thailand and Cambodia, whether you think it's fabricated or not, but it was used as a favor of the conservatives. And we can see that in the 5 provinces that is on the border with Cambodia, and there was no chance that reformist or liberal voices were heard. So yeah, those are the 2 things that changed.
So you already unpacked a lot of what happened in February 2026 election. So the voter fatigue by design, the turnout being 10% lower than the last time, that's a big factor, and the conflict. So let's talk a little bit about that conflict, because this was my understanding is that this was the first time in this century for conservatism and nationalism, the party that represents those things, actually won the election. And big part of that, people talk about how big part of that is the border conflict with Cambodia that gave greater legitimacy to the military and the party that represents the military. Can you say a little bit more about that conflict with Cambodia? And you mentioned that some of that might be a little bit overplayed. Can you characterize?
Oh, well, before I deep down into answering the question, it's micro now. I think we should make it comprehensive and do a macro first, what happened in February. So I mentioned about the constituency, voter fatigue by design, people are fed up. Second C is conflict. The third is candidate, which is our own party. We also did something wrong as well. And fourth C, I want to say competitive collusion. So that's the whole thing of what happened, why we lost in 2026. I could explain it in 4 C's: conflict, candidacy, constituency, and constitution, and custom and competitor collusion. So many things. So, for example, competitor collusion, we see that the conservative parties colluded. They merged the party, or they decided not to run for one another. So it used to be us against 4 conservatives. So they decided to collude by merging or by stepping aside. So it's one reformist against one conservative now, rather than fragmented competition. That's one thing. The second thing is constitution, because the constitution allows election commission to be appointed also. So I felt like the election was not so fair. There was no linkage to the people, and there was no check and balance. And constituencies is the border fatigue by design. And now back to the conflict, to answer your question at a deeper level.
Before getting into conflict, what you said is quite interesting about democracy and the election. Can you say a little bit more about how was the conservative side able to do this, what you call competitive collusion, which means that they put up one candidate in one district, basically, which the other side was unable to.
So back in 2023, it's like 4 parties, 4 candidates. This time it's 4 parties, 1 candidate, conservative. They think like a GSP student. If you can beat them, you join them, and you either merge with them or you try to collude. It's like very, very pragmatic way of politics, transactional way of politics. So I asked a data science to look at the number of people who run for MP. It reduced by 40%. So you see that people who stepped up to become the member of parliament from 2023 to 2026, that number reduced by almost 40%. So instead of having a wide choices for people, maybe one district, 7 candidates, in one district it could be just 3 candidates, for example. So the competitive pool shrunk. So, and this is by design as well. That's how they think about it. They want to make sure that the referee is on their side. That's why they use the constitution to their advantage. That's the second thing. Yeah. And then many things that happen with the voter fatigue on the constituent side, and also the constitution is the way they draft the rules of the game so that they win: gerrymandering, incumbency advantage, patronage system. So those are the things that happen on the ground.
But was there an effort on your side to consolidate into one candidate in each district? Would that have changed the outcome?
No, we didn't believe in that. We believed in the way we differentiate ourselves. It was very hard to find someone who had the same thinking or the same style, the same value, the same narratives to think about doing those things. So we just offer the best to the people and do a retail politics rather than a wholesale politics. So that is what's happening. But on our side, we made some mistakes, I think. The situation was it was almost like Brahmin left versus merchant right. Brahmin left in the sense that we represented the workers, we represented the indigenous people and things like that. But Brahmin left meant that we professionalized ourselves. We became technocrats. And we tailored our policies and style towards Bangkokians and urbanites. So that's why the election result came out that we still conquer capital cities and big cities all around the country, but we could not flip one rural areas, which I managed to do. People's Party, this time we became like an urbanite, Brahmin left kind of feeling, using a lot of professionals to show that we can govern, but we lost the rural grassroots support that we used to have. And that I think that was a classic dilemma of left or center left politics all around the world. In Europe, you see that, and also arguably with the Democrats in America also. That's a term that I felt like it happened in. So that's like 3-4 C's of why we lost. But the last one, going back in circle to conflicts, 14 years to be precise, I think. The last time that there was a tension over a territorial dispute, and out of nowhere it just happened. And then there was no guardrails, and it escalated very fast. Whether it's the byproduct of the French colonized map or the territorial disputes, and also the Joint Boundary Commission that was in place, and also a lot about gas, a lot about energy within the Gulf of Thailand, between concession between Thailand and Cambodia, and dynastic politics, the two families head to head as well. But at the same time, you cannot deny that there's a spillover effect into the election, that Thailand became more security focus and a lot more nationalistic, where liberal values, for durable peace and things like that was very, very hard to have a place in a conversation or in the campaign. Yes.
What is the conflict now? Did President Trump solve the problem?
Well, he got a good critical minerals deal from Malaysia and from Thailand. Last I checked, ASEAN meeting in Cebu, Philippines on May 8th. There was a side meeting between high levels between Thailand and Cambodia. And it's not just the ceasefire. I think we have to aim for a durable peace within the two countries. And I think the only mechanism to do that is to return back to the border dispute. And that's called JBC, the Joint Boundary Commission, that's been going around for 15 years. And if we return to the table and try to negotiate that out, I think that could be a path towards durable peace between Thailand and Cambodia.
So there are issues on that side of the border, and then on the other side is Myanmar. And you mentioned that there are a lot of issues going on. And can you say how that might impact Thai politics?
Well, first of all, I think we have to establish the rapport that the preamble of why we should care about it. The spillover effect from not caring about Myanmar, whether it's the modern slavery, whether it's illicit finance, whether it's a cyber scam, the cyber operation that came over. So I felt like it's in Thailand's interest for Thailand and ASEAN to care about what happened in Myanmar. Let's put that out there first. And now the development has changed a lot because, after the coup in 2021, the Three Brother Alliance in 2023, the conscription in 2024, the devastated earthquake in 2025, the sham election at the end of the year 2025, and now it's 2026. And it was just a 5-point consensus, a 5-point bullet point that if the ASEAN core, especially Thailand with the geographic proximity, doesn't do anything, it's going to keep going in a dangerous drift like that. And now I feel like this year, in 2026, from what I mentioned, the key milestones that happened in Myanmar until now, it became a lot more complex because of two reasons. I think one is rare earth. Resource politics has become part of, it's not just the minority, it's not just the ethnic groups, it's not just violence between pro-democracies versus military. It's border warfare, rare earth, and now China is in the picture more than ever because of their trade route and their gas pipeline. So it became much harder to solve compared to when I was in office in 2023. I felt like if me and the upcoming leaders, Lawrence Wong just came in, Babong just came in, the ASEAN core, the 5 founders of ASEAN got together and found the right amount of incentive and pressure for people of Myanmar to get on the table and to have a dialogue and minority inclusion and federal governance. Maybe those things would have not gone this far. But now there's no easy answer in Myanmar nowadays, except that Philippines will have to really step up and engage the ASEAN core, maybe call it a mini-lateral, because the entire ASEAN is 10 countries with 10 different governance styles, so it's very hard to find a consensus, but we have to start thinking about mini-laterals of having maybe the 5 members of ASEAN together with the frontier states, which is India and China, and maybe Japan and South Korea, and then try to see what we can do from the outside. From the inside, I think the opposition has to find a way to turn resistance into governance. I mean, there's a lot of territorial resistance going on, and maybe sometimes strong, sometimes weak. But from my dialogue with different ethnic groups and NUGs in various parts of the world, I feel like they really have to come together to really be able to imagine what post-conflict Myanmar would look like. And that's like the federal structure and how do you turn resistance into governance. So the problem is the military cannot win the war and the opposition also cannot govern at the same time. So it becomes a very complicated issue at the moment. And now with a lot of, rare earth, a lot of money, a lot of border warfare that is going on. So it's becoming quite challenging.
Now, you mentioned rare earth minerals, and that's becoming a big issue in the U.S. China competition. Last year, we talked about tariffs and other things.
Yeah.
Now we have those natural resources, including Strait of Hormuz and oil issues. Tell us a little bit more about how that U.S. China competition might affect Thailand and Southeast Asia, especially those resource issues.
Okay. So I think what I read in between the lines from Beijing last week is a managed competition, a managed rivalry, a competitive coexistence between America and China. I mean, there was no clear winner out of it. There's no real hegemon that came out of it. President Trump went to Beijing with his Trump card being strapped, because of the court that struck down the tariff, and the midterm is coming up, and Xi Jinping knows that, and you can see that they have to find a way to make sure that it de-escalated. So President Trump got his soybean orders and Boeings, and Xi Jinping got his strategic stability of boxing America from not transferring weapons or the transaction of weapons to Taiwan. And I think it remains to be seen in the ongoing calendars because I feel like the two giants will keep talking. There's, in November, I believe it will be G20 in Miami, and APEC will be in Shenzhen in December. So I think it remains to be seen what this competitive coexistence that is happening in America will happen. But yeah, the majority of the substance is not just about tariffs and factories, it's about critical minerals and chips now. Another observation that I saw is that the leverage that the tech CEOs have over Secretary of State or foreign ministers, you can tell that these non-state actors played a lot of role in Beijing. And I feel like going forward, that will be the kind of world that we live in. From the most upstream, which is the rare earth and critical minerals, to fabrication, to ship design, to ship manufacturing, to AI integration, to LLM models, all these things will be very complex and it will be integrated in geopolitics. That's for sure.
Some of the people in this room might become one of those tech giants and their leaders. So remember this. So I want to throw it open to the floor and also the Zoom audience from Thailand. I think there are a lot of people from Thailand watching this. So be prepared to ask questions. One last question from me.
Sure.
What are your plans? You go to the upcoming governor's election, and are you going back to campaign for that?
I cannot.
You cannot say it.
I have a daddy duty.
Okay.
So this time I brought a Bostonian twin with me. My daughter is here in the audience.
Yeah.
So she moved to Brookline now. She's a twin, so she doesn't stay in one place. So she's probably running around enjoying Stanford weather. But because her school hasn't finished that, so I have to be with her during school, so I don't get to go back this time.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll be around in North America for a couple of more years, enjoying teaching, enjoying meeting next gen leaders. It might be in America, it might be around the area, but I'm very interested in the middle power moment. I mean, it's been abstract for a very long time, 40, 50 years that we've heard the word middle power, and you started to see that it's really time for it to be realized, whether it's Canada, visiting Modi in India and Australia and Japan and things like that. So whether they can get together and really have that strategic autonomy of what's going on between the great power rivalry is very interesting to me. And Thailand is still the second largest in ASEAN, so we have our agency, our autonomy, whether we use it or not. That's something that remains to be seen. So I'm interested in that next year.
Thank you. We want. Oh, we can probably. I think we are inviting people to stand up behind that microphone to ask questions. Is that okay? So if you have questions, please go and. Oh, you can have microphone.
Can we do it like last time? We do it in rounds.
Okay.
3 questions, and I answer in one go. So if it's redundant or repetitive, I don't have to.
Sorry, I'll take this
Sure.
first question นะคะ so thank you คุณทิมพิธา for the clarity นะคะ I'm from Thailand so having lived through it it still helped to clarify
I'd like to ask everybody to identify themselves quickly. So.
Yeah, sure. I'm Wanvipam from Thailand, but I'm a deep tech investor, so I travel between Thailand and here. And it brought me the point that in deep tech investment, we're often looking for this hockey stick, right? And makes me wonder in Thai politics, what do you think would help pushing us towards that watershed moment? Because for us, a lot of us, I think your election, we had hoped that it would be one of them. But having learned through that, what would be your kind of suggestion going forward to make that happen?
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Haulia. I'm a Singaporean democracy scholar and practitioner here at Stanford. Thank you very much. I'm a big fan as well. 2 very quick questions. It's one thing to win power. It's something else about what you do with that power. We've seen many times reformers, pro-democracy politicians, once they get into power, their platform gets derailed by coalitional politics, the challenges of compromise and everything. We've seen this in Aung San Suu Kyi to Anwar Ibrahim. I'm curious about your theory of change, about once you get to power, how do you maintain the straight and narrow, right? How do you maintain this platform? How do you institutionalize this reformist sort of platform? Second question, very quick. Do you have any words of advice for young fellow Southeast Asians who want to build resilient democracies and resilient democratic transitions? Thank you very much.
Are just 3 questions? Or?
That's fine. We take one more. Advice, right? Okay.
Hello, my name is Kaya John Kaya. I'm a hybrid researcher at Chulalongkorn.
Oh, wow.
In Bangkok. I'm at the Energy Research Institute, so it's great to see you.
Cool.
I was actually present in Thailand in February, and there was a considerable lack of energy, for lack of a better word, amongst the voters there, partly due to the void left by, your sort of charisma, the way that the Move Forward Party had sort of operated. And I wanted to know more so about Thailand, but also in general, how can you sort of boost or sort of mitigate, I should say, the voter fatigue that you talked about, and sort of rally these younger voters towards more of the progressive movements?
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to Tarantino it and go with the last first. For us to combat what happened in February and make sure it doesn't happen again, we have to be hyper-local. And it was Marshall Gantz from Harvard, who I have the privilege of sitting opposite. Like our office, it's almost like diagonal. I see him almost every week. And he told me that you have to be able to differentiate between mobilizing and organizing. And when he said that, and I felt like I had that epiphany moment of when we try to mobilize people for votes, it's like more of above the line, social media, crowd size, and things like that. But the autocrats or conservatives are very good at organizing and grassroots management. And I feel like we have to be able to do both mobilizing and organizing. And in February, as you were at Chulalongkorn, maybe we mobilize a lot and we use a lot of above the line communications, and we ignored organizing, which is below the line things. But you have to take it with a grain of salt that because our party gets demolished 2 times, and there's a threat for the 3rd time now last week. Because of that, the human resources of politics, the people who used to do organizing for me, who used to work in the back office, now have to be the front runner because the front runner gets banned. So even if you have a succession plan and a lot of talent pipeline, but once the autocrats try to stall progress and ban political parties, it's organizational cumbersome that you have to rebuild again and again and again. And the people who used to do grassroots now have to become a spokesperson. He's very good with like underground people like talking to each other and how to like get people to come out and become a community and things like that. All of a sudden, he has to give speeches. So it's a different style of doing, and that became a bit hard. So I feel like going forward, we have to really be hyper-local. We really have to do both mobilizing and organizing at the same time. We have to be both above the line and below the line. And because of that, you're creating a voter's journey from the morning when you wake up, you see me on social media. And then later on, you watch TV, then you see my policies. When you get to the bus station, then you see my signs. During in the afternoon, then you see me debate. In the evening, then you see me on TikTok again. So it's like above the line, below the line, on ground, on net, on air, on site. On air is TV, on net is social media, on site is factories, hotels, and hospitals and schools. On ground is that caravan that you go around. So it has to be both above the line and below the line, mobilized and organized at the same time, so that the fatigue is being pushed back. Otherwise, it's very hard if you're not hyper local. The second question was about making sure that you win the right way and you compromise the right way, I think, if I reflect your question. So to me, I think it's not a zero-sum game that you really have to separate that you have your values and you have your promises and you have your DNA that differentiates you within the political spectrum and pragmatism. I think you can be a principled pragmatist and you can be a pragmatic, valued reformist at the same time. You just have to be really clear on your why you run in the first place and be very clear on that and to understand that it's your DNA. If you break your promises, that's the end of your party. For example, I'm willing to be flexible on cabinet seats. I remember saying to the coalition that was in part of my coalition that because of your numbers, you should get about 5 ministers. I'm happy to give you 8 ministers, as long as you promise that what I promised the voters will really happen. That's something that I'm willing to be flexible with. But for me to be a flip-flop politician or to turn back on my promises, I promise to demonopolize. I'm going to pass the law to break up the energy monopolies. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to backtrack. Because if I do that, that's the end of my political career. That's all I have. I have no resources. I have no money. I have no weapons like the military. I only have integrity and accountability. But I'm also not naive that I'm not going to run into the wall all the time. I mean, I'm willing to know that this is my boundaries that I'm not going to change. But outside of this, I'm willing to be flexible and have my zone of possible agreements, SOPA, in what I can give in return to what I want and things like that. So I think you can be you can be a principled pragmatist at the same time. It just needs a lot of clarity and a lot of thinking, a lot of self-awareness of what you stand for, and you should be able to do it. The last question was about the deep tech ecosystem in Thailand. Well, there's both opportunities and threats. I think the opportunity is that there's a lot of pain point in Thailand. If you look at gaps in infrastructure or gaps in public health or gaps in transportation, in education, that's the untapped market that if you digitize it, it becomes a potential rather than a problem. So if you have that kind of local understanding and a lot of innovation, you could turn problems into potentials. But the threat of having a deep tech in Thailand is corruption and nepotism. And suppose you want to do a permit of something that is related to technology, usually those big companies will be able to get it before you. Like before you can have a unicorn, you have to work with the sleeping giants. You have to take care of it. You have to fight with the tigers and the elephants first. Whether it's the bureaucracy in getting a permit or doing your sandbox, or to really fight with the sleeping tigers who are monopolies, who have enjoyed the concentration of wealth and power for a very long time, and you're trying to disrupt them, so you got to fight them back. But my advice would be, yes, to look at this, technology for inequality. If there's inequality in Thailand somewhere, and you could use that technology to turn that inequality to inclusiveness, turn that problems into a potential market. That's why Grab is doing so well in ASEAN, correct? Because of the gap in infrastructure. So if you look at all these problems and you turn it into a potential, I think there's a way for you to take care of it. And lastly, I think regional ambition, because there's a lot of Thai startups that are very good at ideas, but because they focus too little only in Thailand, 76 million people is not enough for a platform. You just have to have that kind of regional ambition of going beyond Thailand, and then you'll be able to be successful. Second round.
Thanks so much. My name is Swan. I'm a PhD candidate in the sociology department. The first question is about Myanmar, and I know you spoke on Myanmar quite extensively, and I appreciate that because I think a lot of the times it gets boiled down into a civil war instead of really recognizing the different forces at play, especially the resistance in relation to the oppressive military. I was just wondering, based on your reflections on the Cambodian border, do you feel like people's reactions to that border altercation has shifted sort of the general view of how Thailand should approach its borders in relation to other countries like Myanmar, for example? Like, has that just generally led to a more sort of retrenched view of what Thailand should be doing in relation to its neighbors? So that's the first question. And then just a quick second question. The politics of losing, right? Like, what does it mean for us to move forward when our preferred political party loses? Especially, you talk about training the next gen leaders. Like, what does it mean, especially, in the U.S., for example, where a lot of people might be disillusioned about politics? Like, how do we move on from that? How do we learn from loss, and then how do we transition that into like future change? Thank you.
Garrett Rock here from the Myanmar Gazette. The question I have is about the ASEAN 5-point plan. And the second part of that was the constructive dialogue among all parties. And that was a position that you had agreed to or endorsed early on. Are you still part of that dialogue and part of that stance? Constructive engagement with all parties? The reason I ask is that dysphoria here is actually, it's a non-starter to include the military in any discussions about what's going to happen. Okay. The second question I have is, overall, what is your stance of the National Unity Government and their role in the process?
Hi, I'm Jarongkorn. I'm a gastroenterologist at Chulalongkorn University, and I'm here to do visiting scholar at Stanford. So my question is about healthcare. So, like universal coverage program has been going on in Thailand for several years, and it's a very successful program. Most of Thai people don't do saving anymore for healthcare because they think they're guaranteed to be taken care of by doctors. But the system is failing because of we don't have enough budget to meet with the current healthcare burdens and anymore. And the doctors are resigning. We cannot work with this minimum wage anymore. What is your stance on this problem, and how you're gonna tackle this?
Okay, thank you. Both questions is fine. Please go ahead.
I wonder if you would be willing to elaborate on your comment that this is a middle power moment. The counterargument seems obvious. I think there's a general consensus in this building, which is only one building, that BRICS is not really much to hope for. I'll leave it up to you to either disagree or give evidence as to why you do agree that BRICS is really not the avenue for this famous middle power moment. And who has benefited the most from American foreign policy recently under Donald Trump? The answer is China. Could the middle power moment be kind of, sort of hitchhiking on China? That is to say, another country that would include middle powers in a way that they had not been included previously. And the last comment I want to make in the same context, I was struck by the complete absence of ASEAN in your remarks. And yet, if we're talking about a middle power moment, that's obviously, that acronym comes immediately to mind. So should we sort of give up about ASEAN as well? And if so, is there really a middle power moment?
Yes, so 4 questions. The first one was about the border conflicts in Cambodia and whether that applies to Myanmar as well, because Cambodia and Thailand is this long when it comes to border, but Thailand and Myanmar is 7,000 kilometers, so it's a bit of an issue that is comparable in size with Cambodia. I think the answer to that is to have a preventive measure before a conflict happens. You got the kind of military hotlines and guardrails that countries can really work towards another. The second would be about technology, because the border warfare that is happening from Cambodia and Myanmar is not just military. It's narcotics, it's scam, it's modern slavery, it's illicit finances and things like that. So, in order for countries to work together and have that kind of preventive guardrails and the civilians that is based on technology or intelligence sharing is something that is utmost important, rather than building walls and trying to fend off each other, because no matter how violent the conflict is, the countries is not going to move. They still have to be neighbors going forward. So I feel like prevention is better than cure when it comes to border management. The second question was about Myanmar and 5-point plan and constructive engagement and NUG position. So 5-point plan has been around for 5 years. I think it's time to turn it to 5 bullet point plan, like from a 5-point plan consensus to a 5-year roadmap. Like try to make it into an implementation of what ASEAN could do to really not leave it as just bullet points, because otherwise it's not going to work. And I would argue that if Thailand doesn't step up on this one, it will remain a 5-point consensus as bullet points. Constructive engagement, yes, I think the broader alignment of engagement, whether it's the NUGs or the ethnic groups, the civil society, the students, the military, and things like that, it has to be a broader one. Whereas China or Thailand or India usually engage only with the military dictators, whether it's a humanitarian effort that goes with the Red Cross into the Myanmar without having a comprehensive and inclusive engagement, you will only understand one side of the story and not the whole picture. And because of that, you make the wrong strategy all the time. So I'm still by that. And after being banned from politics, if I get a chance to talk with the ethnic groups, I do. We meet them in Berlin, we meet them in Bangkok, the NUG foreign ministers or health ministers a couple of times around Europe. So I'm very open to have that kind of broader alignment to really understand what's going on rather than a one-sided conversation that the government has been doing. For NUG, I think minority inclusion will be the key for NUG to regain the legitimacy within Myanmar. And if that happens, I feel like the consolidation of diverging views might be possible in Myanmar. And that translated to a possible governance that I mentioned earlier. Healthcare system in Thailand is guaranteed in terms of frequency and quantity, but not so much on quality. And efficiency needs to be the key. During COVID crisis, I started to see the level of inequality of equipment between Bangkok and Bangkok. And that's something that needs to be rationalized. It's not just that you have that kind of universal guarantee system, but there's no quality. And the quality both for the patients and for the public health laborers, because 80 hours per week is not going to fly for nurses and doctors in Thailand. And if you are one doctor and you take care of 7,000 people, you're not going to be able to do a good job no matter how good you are, how dedicated you are. So you really have to think about, yes, universal guarantee is one thing, sustainability is second, quality is third, and efficiency within the system is the most important thing to do. But if you don't do that, all the doctors will just move to a different country or will turn into a private hospitals rather than working in the public sector, and the promises will perish. The middle power moment. I still don't believe in it that much, to be precise. But within the past 50 years that it's been around, the probability of getting close to it might be this year or next year, that finally you realize that if you rely on the Americans on security and the Chinese on the economy, you are going to be forced to choose sides. And once you choose sides, that's the end of everything that you have. So how do you think about neutrality, not as a position, but as a capability? How do you have that kind of economic optionality is by having a mini laterals, talking to countries, not because of their beliefs or their sides, but because of their issues. So I think we'll see a rise of mini-laterals on issues, whether it's AI governance, semiconductor, maritime management, cybersecurity, critical minerals. It will be an issue-based things. It will not be like BRICS. It will not be like, because I'm pro Russia, pro this side, and once I join that, I look like I'm anti-Anglo-Saxon corridor. It's not going to be like that. But there are going to be web of common interests all around to really support the lack of hegemon nowadays in the world. Whether that kind of spider web will really happen or not, it still remains to be seen. But we've seen attempts of prime ministers visiting one another and things like that, and trying to make things relevant once again. But if it's blocks that is inclined towards one camp over the other, that's not going to fly. For ASEAN, I think it depends on the Philippines leadership now. They issued a statement on May 8th, 200 points, that touches on Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Myanmar, the release of political prisoners, about total amity and cooperation, which is 50-year anniversary. Back in 1976, back in Bangkok, they have this total amity cooperation saying that we will resolve our conflict with amity and cooperation rather than force. And that arguably left the region relatively peaceful for the past 50 years. I think it's time to really test that again, whether what happened or the reason why ASEAN happened in the first place, whether we can remain relevant and credible and central anymore. If you go around Chulalongkorn nowadays, or if you go to talk to university students nowadays, are you proud to be Thai? Probably say yes. Are you proud to be part of ASEAN? You get silence. What does it mean for me to be part of ASEAN? What does it do? It's there's a lot of normative frameworks and a lot of statements, human rights of ASEAN, the inclusiveness of SMEs in ASEAN, the digital door of ASEAN, the transboundary haze and pollution of ASEAN, but it doesn't mean anything. I feel like if I'm part of the ASEAN umbrella now, I'll prioritize 2 or 3 things. Maybe the transboundary pollution of, burning palm oil in Indonesia, and it affects Singapore and Malaysia. If you burn something in Cambodia and Myanmar, it affects PM2.5 in Thailand. Something that is relevant to everyone in that country, and just pick that one issue and make sure that ASEAN solves it. And if you can do that, I feel like ASEAN will be back on the table and like some cohesion once again. And if they get talking once again, they will have that counterweight of 0.6 billion people amid the great power rivalry that is going on nowadays. And if they have that kind of common position, that geographic advantage that they have will not be denied by any great power.
I want to go to the questions from online.
Sure.
2 questions. We have a question on Thailand's position on climate change. What should be the way forward for Thailand and Thai people for a sustainable future in Thailand and ASEAN? The second question follows on turning problems into potential. Thailand is experiencing numerous challenges: economic stagnation and rising household debt, shrinking working age population, political instability and entrenched elites, geopolitical energy supply risk, and climate change. Describe why you might be optimistic.
That's a long list. Position on climate change for Thailand is both defensive and offensive. Defensive is that we are top 5 in terms of vulnerability when it comes to climate change. Chronic drought, chronic flood, extreme heat, deforestation, all these will impact a country that relies on agriculture and tourism. So that's why we really need to have that kind of position in order to defend what we have. Offensive position is that we can turn this into a next-gen economic engine. Carbon accounting, smart building management, extreme flash flood management system, responsive environment using AI and sensor to take care of forest fire and things like that. You have that in California and things like that as well. So if you look at it as an offensive position, you could turn this into the next growth engine for Thailand. Especially that you have some historical automotive industry and electronic industry that you could turn it into a precision agriculture king of the entire world, a low carbon agriculture and things like that. So the position on climate change in Thailand can be both defensive and offensive, depends on the vision of the leader. For question number 2, with a long list of problems, it can be summarized in a sentence. We are the second largest in ASEAN and the second slowest in terms of growth. So elephant can't dance. Our median age is 43. Singapore is 41. By the time I return to politics, we could be number 5 rather than number 2, because Singapore, Vietnam, and Philippines will bypass us. So we'll be both poor and old. That's what they're saying. So how we can have hope? I feel like crisis creates clarity. The fact that nobody can deny that long list is true, it's a reason to be optimistic about, because back in 2023, a lot of people still deny that we're not in that much trouble. But now I think it's a common consensus, whether you're inside Thailand or abroad, that we are really in deep trouble with the public debt, with the aging society, with the environmental issues, with our position in the global economy as well. So I feel like that is a clarity that never existed in the very beginning. But once you have that kind of self-awareness of our nation, competitiveness, then we have a lot of talent, and we have a lot of, young folks here in Stanford, in various parts of the world, within Thailand themselves. We still have that geographic advantage that nobody can take it away from us. So whatever is wrong with Thailand can be fixed with what is right with Thailand. You just need to have that political will and a lot of inclusion in order to burst out our potential. That's the reason to be optimistic about.
Probably the last round of questions.
Thanks so much. My name is Oren Sandman. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Center on Democracy, Development, and Rule of Law here at Stanford. I study opposition politics in Southeast Asia, so I'm particularly interested in your assessments of campaign strategy and what went well in 2023 versus 2026. And I was struck by your comment about conservative collusion, as you put it, to run only a single candidate versus multiple candidates against one another. And it's striking in particular because that's a strategy that's worked for many opposition parties in other parts of Southeast Asia and other parts of the world. So I'm curious why you sort of put that aside as a strategy that moved forward, or I guess the People's Party was going to pursue in that context, and how you think about coordinating with other opposition parties, even ones where you may have sort of significant disagreement. And then the second question is, I'm curious if you have any kind of regrets about the 2023 elections aftermath, and or better way of putting it perhaps is anything you would have done differently, knowing what you know now, because you clearly ran a pretty effective campaign, you won, but afterwards weren't able to kind of translate that because of, as you mentioned, the Senate and other institutional features. But is there anything you, thinking back, could have kind of made a different strategy in how you coordinated with people afterwards or other institutions that may have made a difference?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joseph Ong. I'm with a member of Free Burma Action Committee. My question is, because these days different countries are sending their political leaders to meet with the military junta, what is your thought on, I know you said you were open to dialogue with everyone, just wanted to know what your thought about this so-called, the President Miao Line, who was the general, is by acknowledging them, you're kind of legitimizing their rules. So I just want to hear what you're thinking.
Hi, I'm from Thailand. ผมชื่อเอกนะครับ
ครับ
คุณพิธา do you think you and คุณธนาธร and พรรคประชาชน party do you think you can beat ระบบที่ชั่วร้ายนี้ได้ไหมครับ เป็นกำลังใจให้นะครับ
ได้ครับ ขอบคุณมากครับ
Hi, thank you again for the very interesting talk. I had a question about, we just mentioned aging population in Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
And our last neighbor that we haven't mentioned is Laos, that also has a very young population.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe would it be relevant to strengthen the partnership between Thailand and Laos from that point of view, maybe?
Okay, so 4 questions. Let me organize my thoughts first. Okay, the first one was about the difference between 2023 and 2026. And you were interested in competitor collusion, and that's supposed to be opposition strategy in many countries. I think you're referring to Hungary and Malaysia and things like that, I think, and whether I would consider doing the same thing or not. Well, for me, I come from a camp where I think competition creates efficiency. So I want to be as competitive as possible. I try to make sure that my talent pipeline is strong, capable, and vigorous, so that I have the best possible choice to run. And you can also do that kind of probability and calculus and things like that, but it's not always the case. And I feel like I have limited amount of time. I'd rather present the best candidate and the best policy rather than, talking behind doors and say, okay, for this constituency, I think my candidate is better than yours, so why don't you step aside? I pay you 10 million and you go away and you stop walking around, and this, I give it to you because yours is stronger and things like that. But I think that would be a disrespectful for the voters that reduces their choice to do so. So that hasn't been discuss in our party, and I feel like we want to do what we had done in the past going forward still. The regrets after the election, too slow and too little time. Too slow was that, after the surprise or the stunning victory, I would have expedited a lot of process because they weren't able to come up with a strategy. They weren't able to come up with an autocratic strategy to get rid of me. So if I were to swiftly expedite processes, convene the parliament and make sure that I established the conventionality of maybe 3 or 4 votes before that happened, things might be different if I were to not too slow and try to build momentum and try to build consensus and try to be inclusive. I mean, that could be a wrong assessment, but that could be a different direction that I could take, that I would very much directional and expedite everything and get into power as quickly as possible rather than trying to build momentum. But at the same time, I had too little time to build momentum and to build consensus and to build coalition. I spent a lot of time speaking to my political opponents. I would show up in front of the military senior officers or to the monopoly families and let them grill me. Or even people who revere the institution to really ask me questions. And they would ask me whether I was a product of CIA. They would ask me whether I went to Harvard because of CIA money. They would say whether I would separate southern part of Thailand from Thailand. They would think that I'm transforming Thailand into something that they are not familiar or accustomed with. I do that a lot to really dominate ideas and answer tough questions so that they can trust in me, because I felt like there was a lot of over-paranoia that a 46-year-old like me, who comes from a middle-class family, could turn Thailand into something that they're not accustomed to, which is not true. I just wanted to be inclusive. I just wanted to be competitive. I just wanted to be comprehensive. That's all, nothing more. But I think I had too little time in order to do that. I had some support from people in my generation, the sons and the daughters of the monopolies would vote for us, for example, but their parents probably not, for example. So I felt like if I had more time to really sit down, look them in the eye, and get them to ask me as tough as they want, and I would be able to defend my position and gain their trust, that I would be able to obtain the votes. So too little time and too slow, which is a paradox. Number 2 from the Free Burma Coalition, right? Action Committee. Just to meet with Min Aung Hlaing is a mistake. Let's put it like that. I would meet with all the stakeholders, not to intervene with your internal situations, but really to understand what's going on inside Myanmar. So I would meet with all the stakeholders, not just whoever's in power. Whether to meet or not to meet is not as important as the content of the meeting. So if I were to meet, the content about the forced disappearance, the people who got killed, the families that were separated, the scam operation that is happening, the environmental concerns that comes from your minds will be raised up. I will raise that up with them. And I'll make sure that it's transparent and that it's not closed doors, because I have no transactions between leaders of any ASEAN countries and me. It's just for my people in Thailand, for the common prosperity of people of Myanmar and people of Thailand. And what happens in your country is your business, but the spillover effect impacts my country. So yes, I would meet with NUG, I would meet with the ethnic groups, I would meet with Min Aung Hlaing with this kind of content that I'll mention. It's not just going to be just an endorsement or a handshake or a photo up and walk away. It's not going to be like that. So I think that's more important than whether meet or not to meet, but to meet for what and for what agenda of the meeting is more important. Number 3, whether I can beat it. I think I can. I think about it every single night to return to the arena and become a player. And but I can wait. You know, I could strategize. I could accumulate small victories until I'm strong, vigorous, and capable. And when I return, I will change Thailand for good. So I still think I can. The last one on aging population. Yeah, so I think that applies to a lot of countries where if you're a developed country and a developing country, then you usually have that kind of age demographics differences. And many countries struggle with it, with how you design your talent management in the country is very important. I'm thinking about South Korea. I'm thinking about Japan. I'm thinking about Taiwan. I'm thinking about European countries where they also rely a lot on Filipinos and Indians, for example. But how do you make sure that it's a benefit to your country and to their laborers, to the workers, but at the same time you have that guardrails to minimize the lack of harmony within the society as well. So you got to make sure that the migrant rights is there and the social protection is there, both for your own people and for them as well, so that it's more sustainable. You make sure that you don't take advantage of them. You make sure that you protect human rights when they come in and understand that there are nuts and bolts of your economy. If there's no people from Laos or Cambodia or Myanmar, no one's going to work in the fishery business in Thailand. No one's going to work in restaurants washing dishes and things like that. So they mean something to our economy. And if governments are rigorous in their planning, they should be able to maximize the benefit while minimize the downside of having migrant workers. But I think the governments are too lazy nowadays to think about it, whether it's European countries or East Asian countries. But either you use the humanoids or the robots, or you automate them, or you need to get people to younger folks to help with your economy. So there's a couple of options that you have, but that depends on how visionary the government is, or how rigorous and comprehensive the government is.
You talked about going hyper-local. You win in this area, the Bay Area, without really campaigning on the ground, and you have supporters here, Thai restaurants, who cater the food that you enjoyed today. Special thanks to our catering sponsors, Holy Shred, for providing the lunch boxes, and Lotus, and also Lotus Thai Bistro for the generous donation of samosas, which you enjoyed and Pita and I will enjoy in a moment. We would also like to extend our gratitude to Not Kibiwa Tanakara and the Stanford Thai Student Association for their assistance in organizing this event. Thank you. And most of all, thank you, Pita, for such an engaging and enlightening discussion. I hope you come back every year now.
Let's make it.
Annual event to update with Pita would be a great event for our program to host. So please join me in thanking Pita for this wonderful session. Thank you. Thank you.